All right, Coach. At Albertus Magnus, can you walk us through a day-to-day lifestyle of a baseball player? That can be anything from practice, classes, training regimens, lifting, film analysis. Kind of take us through the day-to-day, but also, kind of stretch it out through your calendar year.
Yeah, so the NCAA is really restricted with Division III in the fall season, so they allow 4 or 5 weeks of practice, 16 total dates of competition. So I don't know why you would go 5 weeks, but because you're limited with the amount of weeks you can have in the season. So we go 4 weeks, we go a month, we go 4 days a week. We'll mix in a scrimmage against a junior college. They allow usually an alumni game, and then we have a player development sort of mindset. So our goal is to evaluate everybody in the fall, do all the measurements that we have in terms of, generally we start with a functional movement screen that, really just measures how they move. And then from that, we test them in the beginning of the fall and then at the very end. Um, and that goes into, how we're going to get their body to move more efficiently. One of our philosophies is that if you think of the body as a table that has a broken leg or a crack in it, if you start going into the gym and throw a ton of weight on it, you're going to end up breaking the table. So we want to make sure those legs are solid and stable, and the body's moving the way it's supposed to move in terms of movement patterns, et cetera, so that then we can, program them properly in terms of lifting and throwing and recovery and all that stuff. So with that, most of our players have, especially the freshmen, have never gone through something like that before. And a lot of times you're going to, reveal hip mobility issues and, shoulder mobility issues or whatever, in areas that we can kind of target in the very beginning. And then over those 4 weeks, we'll video guys and come up with a plan in terms of how we want to attack their individual skill set. So hitting, running, fielding, their mental game, how they eat, how they sleep, all that kind of stuff, because everything is a big piece of it. And so part of that is really just establishing what we call their player development manual is going to be, what their program is going to be. And at the end of the fall, we'll sit down with them and we'll say, okay, here's the deal. We videoed you doing these particular drills that we're going to give you specifically that you need to focus on. So this is what your lifting schedule is going to be. This is going to be your lifting group, from when you're done with us in the fall to in the spring. And this is how we're going to go about trying to make you the best person and baseball player you're capable of being. So it's a way for us to really stay on top of them and make sure that we're not wasting any time just giving them a general program. Some guys that have terrible hip mobility, and other guys have great hip mobility. Some guys are really lax. They have a lot of, they're very, very loose in the shoulders. Some guys are really tight. So, to give those guys the same, type of program is really teaching to the middle. We try to stay away from that. It's certainly more work to do an individualized program, but there's a reason why we've had, one arm injury, 1.5 arm injuries in 16 years, because we are very cautious and smart about how we program things. And so we try to keep guys healthy. One of the things we say, the best ability is availability. If you're not healthy, you can't play for me. You're not really going to help anybody. So we want guys to be able to be recovered and at their best. So we'll start with that in the fall. We're done in the fall. We're not allowed to have any direct coaching with them. We'll have small groups where they work on their own. The captains will run captains practices, and typically we'll do 1 or 2 days a week in terms of either inter-squad scrimmaging, or if the weather's not any good, it starts to get colder. We have a 70-foot cage in the gym that they can drop down and they'll compete that. So we treat it like the Navy SEALs in a lot of ways, where we have boat leaders that are in charge of a group of guys. So those leaders have been picked out. They're in charge of a certain number of guys and in terms of what they do and holding them accountable. So from when they come back in January, we sit down again with them, and over the winter break, we work in how their return to come back to play to us in January works. And then when January happens, we have the first meeting, middle of the week they get back. We give them the weekend to kind of get settled, and then it's 6 days a week from then on, Monday through Saturday. We'll practice facility Monday through Friday, that indoor facility that we have, 2-hour practices, and then Saturday mornings. And Sundays are off. So typically 6 a.m. Saturday practices. That's when we can get the gym, usually about 3 hours. and we'll go through it. So once they're back in the spring, they get up, depending on when their lifting group is. Let's say they have a morning lifting group. They'll lift in the morning. They'll go to class. They'll eat lunch as a team, sit in a certain area in the cafeteria. Then they'll go off to practice. Sometimes guys will do a study hall or a tutor before they go to practice. A lot of guys like to do it after. And depending on the day, we will have team activities generally scheduled. So like Mondays are our yoga day. So we do team yoga after Monday's practice. We were trying to do it 2 days a week, and then the whole COVID thing happened. So that was something new that we did that guys really liked in terms of recovery. But we'll practice from, 3 to 5 or 3:30 to 5:30 or whatever it is. And then they'll go and then they'll eat. And then, they'll either go to yoga and then lift after or lift in their group, what they have going on, whether it's speed and development or lifting, depending on what their program is. And then they'll do that. We get up, do it again every day. And then Saturday morning we'll practice. Typically we'll split the Saturday practice up, different stations, whether we're working on our training, whether we're working on our mental toughness training, our speed and development, our bat speed protocols, whatever it is we're working on. Again, it's very individualized. So just because you're in a hitting group doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do the same drills as the guy next to you. So we're very conscious of how we focus on workload. We call it repetition opportunities. So we don't want to waste time. I think a lot of coaches practice very long because they're inefficient. There's only so many hours in the day. And if you want players to be able to be recovered and get better, you can't waste. What can be accomplished in 2 hours shouldn't be done in 4 or 3. That's time that they need to study. That's time that they need to go to study hall at night. So there's definitely a lot of things going on. And if we preach balance and we want them to be student athletes, we have to be respectful of their time as well. So we have to be very organized and very efficient in how we do things. It's a little easier in a facility that you only run out for 2 hours because you can't go 2 hours and 1 minute or 2 hours and 2 minutes. You get 2 hours and that's it. And if you plan a poor practice, you're going to wear it as a coach at that point. So we do our best to be super efficient, and that's really our program. We'll start playing games in March. And so when March happens, we usually will play 1 or 2 games before we go down to Myrtle Beach. We go to Ripken's place down in Myrtle Beach. It's a great facility. In South Carolina, we'll play 8 games typically down there. And then, after that week is over, then we're on our way up. So this past year before we got shut down, we had 10 games that we were able to play. We were obviously happy with our offense. We typically will swing it. We had 17 home runs in 10 games, which, it's pretty awesome. We probably could have hit a few more, to be quite honest. We played on some big fields down there. So we felt like we were rolling, and then kind of the world shut down. But, part of that is just constant refining of what players need all the time. So, with the mobility screen, we retest guys, and if their mobility is improved, then we adjust and we try to, find gains anywhere we possibly can. So it's a constant, measuring process in terms of, every 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to measure guys in certain areas. We typically stagger it. So, week 1, we may do, for catchers, we may do pop times and arm velos. And then, the next week when we measure, it might be a blocking and whatever it is we're working on, framing or whatever. So, we have set things that we do for defense, offense, and it creates a competitive environment because everything's posted and everything's public. And so those guys are really competing against each other. And the idea is to just get better every day. And that's something that we kind of program into it.
All right, Coach. Next question. Introduce your staff. What are their specialties, and maybe give us a little bit of insight on the offensive, defensive pitching philosophies you all share.
Yeah. So myself just finished year 16 as the head coach. Involved in pretty much everything. Really big offensively. I run the offense. It's what we do. With our side business, working with professional players, and really something that's unique to what we do across the country against anybody, quite honestly. What we do, teach timing wise and all that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I have a graduate assistant pitching coach who played for me, was a Division II player that finished his career with us. He's our pitching coach, has been with me for several years, went through the program, finished, was a captain, coached, and then was a graduate assistant the last 2 years. He's actually finishing up his degree. He says he's in a 3-year program. he's moving over to the housing side, so it's technically a housing graduate assistant, but he's still going to be coaching with us. We're on the pitching staff, and then we have a Division I volunteer, a former Division I player volunteer coach last year who's now moving into the vacated graduate assistant position. He was a Division I catcher, very good, left-handed hitting Division I catcher, really good. And then our paid assistant is a professional catcher, played in independent ball, actually broke his neck, slid to home, pretty gruesome injury. He's been rehabbing his body to go back to play baseball, and he's actually opened a facility in the area. He's obviously specialty is catching and hitting. He does a great job. And then we have another volunteer assistant coach who is a BP machine. It's the best BP and fungos you've ever seen in your life, and he's 70 years young, and he looks like he's about 50, and he can run circles around the 20-somethings we have on the staff. An old Navy vet, and also have my father-in-law, but his son and my brother-in-law played 4 years of Division I baseball as a shortstop and had a couple of professional tryouts. He's coached forever, and he's an animal. He just throws BP nonstop. It's absurd. He's like an Iron Mike. He just goes, and the young guys kind of think it's funny at first, and then at the end of practice, we're like, the guy's still going. It's like, yeah, he just doesn't stop. So that's our coaching staff. We also have another former player who is our director of baseball operations, and he is somebody who is very technically savvy in terms of video and analytics and that kind of stuff, and actually been able to start a major at school that deals with analytics, kind of parlaying off of that, something the college has been working on very heavily, and now it's a major. It's a minor right now, but I was told in the fall it's going to be turned to a 4-year major, so that's pretty exciting because it's something that he sort of started and is going to be the first one to graduate from that program. So that's our coaching staff in a nutshell. Offensively, we believe the game ultimately breaks down between who wins the confrontation between the pitcher and the hitter the most, and it's the part of the game that I believe is undercoached in a lot of ways. We focus heavily on live, part of our player development philosophy. Offensively, we teach timing and natural movements. We actually teach functional timing, which I would argue most coaches either don't know how to teach or just don't even bother teaching. Our players will get between 105 and 125 live or simulate at-bats against the pitcher before they play against anybody else. And a lot of college programs, guys don't get to that number of at-bats until they're almost done with their season or midway through. Our goal is to have that accomplished before they ever play against anybody else. And what it does is it not only makes our pitchers better, but it also gives them an opportunity to work on what really matters, which is ultimately timing. We believe that the single most important ingredient to hitting is timing. You can have guys, we've all coached guys or played with guys that can hit fastballs a mile, and then they get in a game and they can't hit a breaking ball. It has nothing to do with him not being able to see spin. It has nothing to do with him not knowing how to hit a breaking ball. It has everything to do with lack of timing. It's no different than when you face what I call a biscuit flipping left-hander who, looks like he's flipping biscuits as he's throwing it to the plate. He's throwing 14 miles an hour. No one can hit him. They're walking back to the dugout going, "Coach, this guy's terrible. He's the worst." Really? Because it's, we have 2 hits. So it's not that he has dynamic stuff. It's just that you don't understand how to deal with timing on a functional levels. That's something that we preach. We really don't swing and miss all that much. I think not last year, but the year before, 92% of our strikeouts were looking, which as a coach makes you want to pull your hair out. But we don't really swing and miss. We're not really fooled by things, and that's because of what we teach. And defensively, we want to put pressure on the offense as much as possible. We will shift. We will do some quote-unquote unorthodox types of things. But, for us, like if you look at our defensive alignment, one of our philosophies is that we're not going to give you the gap. If you want to beat us, if you want to beat Albertus Magnus in baseball, just hit the ball down the line. You'll beat us every time you play us. The problem is that's really tough to do and doesn't happen very often. It's also an incredibly low percentage play defensively. So, our third baseman plays off the line. He makes that 6-hole play all the time, and he does it very easily. I think And I go off of last year's stats because we only played 10 games this year, but he took 31 6-hole ground balls away from teams we played against, and I think we got burned down the line 3 times all season. So it's one of those things where we're going to play the percentages and we're going to make you beat us. And we're going to run. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to fight you every pitch until the game's over. And that's something that's our philosophy in terms of how we go about things. We're aggressive. We shift. We do all kinds of different things. Sometimes we'll bring in an extra. We'll go with 2 outfielders. We'll put an extra infielder in if we think we're going to bunt. We do. We call it the Ted Williams shift because that's what it is for left-handed batters and Williams for right-handed batters. And we just put pressure on guys. Our goal is to force you to beat us. We're going to do it on defense as well as on offense. We're going to run our best time out of the box every time. We're going to fight. We're not going to give a single at bat away. And that's just part of what our mindset is. And we're very aggressive in terms of how we go about things. You may beat us, but you're not going to beat us because it's certainly not going to be a toughness thing. You're going to know you played, and we're going to leave everything on the field. And that's really what our philosophy is in terms of that. Pitching-wise is very individualized. Each pitcher gets his own schedule in terms of how we're going to develop them, what their individual goals are. Again, that's all in that player development manual packet that each guy gets. Each guy has individual goals, whether it's exit velocity, whether it's speed development, whether it's vision training, whether it's bat speed development, whether it's mental toughness, skill, whatever it is that we're working on. Every single guy is going to have an individualized goal, and it's going to get tested and retested as the season goes on. You would think that something as simple as a number that you get with some of our vision training that guys wouldn't care, but all of a sudden when it's a competition and it's public, wow, they want to kind of kill each other, and that's what you ultimately want. You want everybody that's there for the right reasons, holding each other accountable and talking a little smack. And it's why, in my opinion, fantasy baseball for no money is way better than fantasy baseball for any kind of money, because it's just bragging rights at that point. I mean, the NCAA doesn't allow that anyway, but a fantasy baseball league that's just for fun and bragging rights to me is way more competitive than just a random league you don't know anybody. So we take that approach in terms of getting guys to compete against each other, and that's really what it is. Every practice is a total competition.
Coach, fill us in on what makes your college and the education there unique to the student athletes, and what majors and educational paths do you see your players taking? And I guess as well, maybe discuss just what enrollment looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Albertus Magnus College, located in New Haven, Connecticut. And so, kind of in between Boston and New York City, for those of you that aren't really familiar with how that works. If you've heard of Yale University, we're a mile from that. So it's definitely New Haven is a college town. So there's Yale University, which is Division I. There's Quinnipiac University, which is Division I. There's University of New Haven, which is Division II private, and Southern Connecticut State University, which is a Division II public, and a small community college, all within a 5 to 10 mile radius. So it's very much a college town, but we are a small school. So we're talking about 550 day students. Our college is kind of the reverse of most colleges. Meaning that our graduate program is about 3 times the size of our day program. It's typically the other way around. So trying to find parking at night is generally more difficult than trying to find parking during the day. Not that we have parking issues, but it's definitely a more livelier campus at night. And so we are a liberal arts school. And so, the benefit of a liberal arts education is that it gives you a lot of perspective in a lot of different areas. You're required to take certain courses no matter what your major is, and oftentimes if you don't know what you want your major to be, going to a liberal arts school is a good bet, because it gives you exposure to a lot of different things. Typically you can find your interest and end up doing what you want to do the rest of your life rather than maybe what you think you want to. And so 13-to-1 class size is typically about what our class size is. So you and 12 kids in class. It's certainly a very much in education. They talk about something called a learning T, where if you sit in the front of the room or in the middle, you tend to learn more, because that's where educators tend to focus their energy. Our school is so small that everybody's in the learning T. There's nowhere to hide. There are no 150-person lecture halls or anything like that. Like, people know where you are, and the professors really care, and our faculty and staff are really, it's very much a family type situation. people are always, they're going to know your name. They're going to know who you are. You don't have to memorize some, 17 special student ID number that you're never going to use. It's not that type of place by any stretch. And where I think we, a lot of schools are small, and that's great. But where I really think we excel is in our internship programs. Because we're so small, we only have to place between 100 and 125 students a year in internships in the whole college. And what's great about that is the internships our kids get are really good because we're not placing 3,000 kids, 4,000 kids, 5,000 kids. We're placing 125 across all the disciplines. And so what ends up happening is that, if you want to be in law enforcement, you're going to go on ride-alongs. If you want to be in the FBI, you're going to be able to go on ride-alongs. If you want to be an accountant, you're going to be able to work, in the accounting firms. If you're going to want to be, in sports management, you're going to be able to work, at ESPN, which is, 25 minutes down the road. So there are a lot of different opportunities that are available. We had one softball player, I remember, she really wanted to study graphic design. That was her major. She got a internship in New York City, and the firm was trying to hire her. She's like, I'm only a junior. I have another year left. Because I remember having that conversation. She's like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, if they want you now, they're probably going to want you, when you have your degree. And that's actually what ended up happening. She's still working in New York City. She's great. So those opportunities, really strong in business, really strong in sports management, really strong in law enforcement, criminal justice, especially different kind of branches, but we offer pretty much everything. So it really depends on what it is. We don't have engineering or anything like that, but as a liberal arts school, we have everything that really goes from there. We have different formats too, blended formats, half online, fully online, on site, on campus. There are actually our flexible options as well. If you want to necessarily take a course, but you do better online, or if you can a lot of times manage your schedule where you can say, okay, I can go fully online Thursday. I don't actually have to visit campus on Thursdays, therefore I can work. There's a lot of flexibility within the college itself, which is really tailored to serving the students. And that's really where we separate ourselves, because every student for us really matters. We're not a state school that's just going to get, a situation where it doesn't really matter. We're going to get enrollment. We're going to get subsidized by the state. Who cares? Everyone's really valued at our place, and it shows. And so, there are a lot of different systems in place to ensure student success, and a lot of those were taken from baseball program. But regardless, there's a lot of, there's a reason why our retention rate and our graduate rate is so much higher than the nation average, is because you've got somebody helping you. You still got to do the work, but you've got somebody along side of you and, helping you and has your back throughout the entire process. And so, we don't wait till your senior year to try to get you hired. It starts, your freshman year, basically. So it's very much a separator, I believe, in a lot of different areas, because there are a lot of different options by us. We are in Connecticut, we are in New England, and there's a million different colleges. But what separates us is that, our students get jobs, and they get jobs in their field. They don't just, a lot of schools, and this is the thing that kind of, a lot of people don't realize, is that technically if you graduate from a 4-year school in 6 years, that's considered graduating. That's the federal standard, which is kind of insane to me. If I took 6 years to graduate in 4 years, I don't know that my parents would be speaking to me. Pay for an extra 2 years in school to do what? Those are called people that have master's degrees. So that, yeah, technically the graduation rate is off of 6 years. And so one of the things that we really strive on as a college, not only is our graduation rate high, but it occurs before 6 years. So it's even more powerful of a stat than it even is, as just a 6-year stat. So not to brag on the school a little bit, but that's something that we really take care of our student athletes and students in general. We really value them as people, and we want them to have a good experience, and that's why we have the success that we do.